Hi and welcome to this tutorial. We're going to start with a file called O2Begin. You can find it in your Maya folder inside the Scenes folder. So if you take a look at this file, we have three spheres, we have a ground plane, we have a V-Ray dome light, a sphere light, and V-Ray has been set as our renderer. With this file, we're just going to review some of the main concepts. I hope that most of you guys understand the basics of shading. We're just going to do a quick review, and from there, we'll keep moving and getting into more and more complex shaders. So the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to take one of these spheres. They'll already be named, and they already have each a unique material. So let's start. They're all like basic V-Ray materials. So let's start with the basics. You can say that a shader is composed of three main elements: your diffuse element, your reflection element, and your refraction element. Pretty much, what does it mean? The diffuse element is a kind of reflection, if we were to take it into like real physics, but where light is hitting the surface of an object, and then some of the light spectrum is being reflected and some of it is not being reflected. In simple terms, we could assume it's the color of our object. So let's just go to our basic diffuse, pick any color, red, hit render, and you'll see that sphere is red. It's a very basic concept. Most people talk about it as diffuse, even though it's still a kind of reflection, because we have a white light that it's hitting the object, and then we're only getting red light bounce back to us. So it's a kind of reflection, but without getting too technical into the physics part, we could just assume it's the color of the object. The next object, I'm just going to go here, set this to black. It's the reflection. The reflection, this could be called like the specular reflection. In these kind of reflections, we're reflecting both the light and our environment, and usually happens when the surface of the material we're trying to recreate, it's flat or polished enough that the rays will reflect in the same order and in like completely the opposite angle as they were incident into the surface. So let's just think of this like, I don't really want to give you guys a physics class, so let's just think of this as kind of like a mirror effect, and then we can start getting speculars and things like that. So I'm just going to turn this against to red, hit render again, and we can see what happens. So now this sphere is just red. This sphere is reflecting from a red color, and it's reflecting everything on its environment. So it's going to reflect the light. The dome light has an HDR, and it's also going to reflect that sphere here. You can see here one sphere and here the other sphere. The third element that we're going to take a look into it's our refraction. So I'm also going to set this to black. And our refraction, I'm going to pick the same red we've been using. I can only region select this so it goes faster, and then you can see what's going on. So reflection is when the light hits the surface and it's bounced back. Refraction is when the light hits the surface and travels through that medium. So refraction is light going through an object. And what happens in physics is that when a light is coming from one medium and it changes to another medium, it's going to bend a little bit and it's going to change an angle. So imagine your first medium being air, or like the environment that you have, and the second medium could be like the inside of glass or water or something like that. So when a light hits that medium, it's going to change angle and it's going to change speed. Without getting again too technical into physics stuff, we can see this is almost like if we were being able to see through. This is like a mirror effect, and this is just the color. These are the three main basic principles of any shader. Most shaders will contain this. Then with this, you have different parameters about like glossiness and subsurface scattering and roughness of the diffuse. But these are the three main parts of any shader: the diffuse reflection, the specular reflection, and the refraction. Or most shaders will just call them diffuse, reflection, and refraction. So with that, I'm just going to change everything to white so it looks a little bit cleaner and you guys can see better what's going on. white, and this one, my basic parameter, white. Let's just take a quick render of this. So now that we understand these three main elements of any shader, you have to think about it. If we were to build our own shader and we want to maybe have a separate shader for the reflection, a separate shader for the refraction, and a separate shader for the diffuse, you have to think, the way you're going to stack them is thinking from the inside out of that surface or that object. So you could, one decent order, if we were like the moment we start stacking our shaders, would be, first you want to have your refraction or anything that it's happening like deeper than the than the top level of the surface, and then these two you can pretty much put in any order, but most of the time your latest coat is going to be a very thin and not too much visible specular reflection. So I guess we could just take this guy and move it, and we could say this is a good order of how we're going to build shaders. And it's important that you guys understand the reason we're going to put it in the order of refraction, diffuse, and reflection is because we want to take into account what's happening from the inside of that surface out. So the most in that we can go is refraction, are the rays of light traveling inside the object. Then after that, we have a layer that would give us the color or the diffuse reflections that we assume to be the color. And then on top, it's usually like a very thin layer or a very thin coat of something that it's reflecting. One of the main things for us to understand how shaders work is that we need to understand that in real life, there's not such a thing as a simple shader. Maybe if you're using like a very pure metal or something like that, but most of the time things have several layers, either because they were painted or because they're dirty or they're greasy, or there's a lot of reasons of why things have several layers. But once we understand that things have several layers, we need to start thinking in how we build our shaders that same way. So this was a very first review of the three main elements and the order that they work in real life, and that order is very important because that's the order we're going to use when we start building our shaders. I'm going to stop here. These first two videos are going to be very simple, very review. I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page when we start building our more complex shaders. So in the next one, we're going to take a look at glossiness on our specular reflection, our reflectance curves, and BRDFs. BRDFs is just a fancy name for a mathematical function on how something reflects light. So I'm going to stop here. This is, again, these first two videos are just very introductory, and I want you guys to all be with the same like knowledge level when we start building our very complex scenes. So I'm going to stop here, and we're going to continue in the next video looking at just specular reflections.